Hello and welcome to On Leading with Greatness. I'm Jim Salvucci. This week's installment, people love categories. Leaders love people more. There may be said to be two classes of people in the world. Those who constantly divide the people of the world into two classes, and those who do not. Robert Benchley. Humans love categories. We can't get enough of slicing and dicing things into small parts and putting them each into their own cozy cubbyholes. We categorize just about anything. In art, we talk about movements. In literature, genres. In education, learning styles. In food, cuisines. We do it with plants and animals. We even do it with people. And while all these categories, classifications, and taxonomies have their usefulness, they have pretty severe limitations. Leaders do it too. Leadership gurus talk about styles of leadership and styles of communication, and leaders slice and dice people into different groups. I've done it myself. We do all this because categories help us make sense of the world. It's impossibly overwhelming to address everything and every person in their wonderful individuality. We often don't have the time or information to separate an individual or a situation from the group our brains assign it to. Frankly, it could be dangerous. If you were a troglodyte stalked by a saber-toothed tiger, it would be most unfortunate if you wasted your time speculating, golly, this tiger might be different from all the other ones who ate my friends. Maybe he just wants to play. No, your brain would go saber-toothed tiger, category bad. Then you'd run, disappointing both the playful and the hungry tiger. Still, as I said, as much as they help us cope in a complex world, categories have their flaws. They can mislead, distort, and conceal. Sometimes they are just dead wrong, but being human, we often overcook them with all the slicing, dicing, and sorting. We just can't quit our impulse to distinguish, distribute, and compartmentalize. One of the great systematizers of history is the 18th century Swedish scientist and physician, Carl Linnaeus. You may not know him, but you know his work. Linnaeus founded the structure that became the biological taxonomy we still use today. That is, all those Latin terms for different plants and animals and their relationships to one another. His massive effort at categorization transformed science and how we view the world. He published his first great work of taxonomy, Systema Naturae, in 1735, but he continued to add species in expanded editions for the rest of his life. Linnaeus was also one of the first scientists to propose that humans were just another animal species, overthrowing centuries of belief about the divine spark of humankind. Thus, Linnaeus is perhaps the greatest and most consequential scientist you never heard of. His categorizing went beyond plants and animals, though. Linnaeus divided humanity into 4, later 6, separate types. He started with physical attributes of different peoples, but eventually, more problematically, added corresponding behaviors indistinguishable from stereotypes. His work constituted one of the earliest attempts at racial differentiation, which others expanded and exploited to establish the apparatus of biological racism that still plagues us. That's right, someone made up race. Although people had always categorized each other, there was really no common, systematic way of doing so. While we can see examples of present-day racial typing way back in history, Europeans really only zeroed in on it as they entered the age of exploration, starting roughly in the 15th century. What we now think of as races, though, as prevalent as they are in our world, only began to fully seize the European imagination during the 18th century, driven by a host of economic, political, social, and pseudoscientific justifications. I would even posit that there was evidence of what we now call racism long before Linnaeus or any of his less influential predecessors ever sliced up the human species. I'm not telling this tale for its own sake, as edifying as it may be. My point is that even categories we treat as absolutes, such as race, are human inventions, sometimes problematic ones. Categories aren't all bad, though. For instance, categorizing has proven wildly productive to our understanding of the world as we followed and improved Linnaeus' lead in classifying plants, animals, and other natural objects. And grasping that humans are animals, as Linnaeus contended, helped us cast off old beliefs and gave rise to modern medicine. No doubt taxonomy constitutes a net gain for science and progress. When applied or misapplied to humans as a species, though, the record grows spottier, sullied by the pseudoscience of biologically insupportable races. So classification serves a useful function, particularly when accurate, or at least fairly accurate. But such systems lack an inherent basis in reality. Humans construct them through arbitrary choices, rendering them often overly confining or even oppressive. And sometimes, as with race, they're just dead wrong. Great leaders recognize the mixed nature of our drive to taxonomize. The irony is that we classify to make sense of a complex world, but the very complexities of that world typically defy or belie our categorization. Therefore, categorization, being arbitrary, always involves some degree of self-deception. I don't want to suggest that categorizing is inherently wrong or bad. It's a tool, and like every other tool, it has its uses and abuses. The trick is to be aware of all. As with other tools, leaders make use of classification out of necessity, but vigilantly police its shortcomings. For instance, consider the RO3, or rule of thirds strategy, I've proposed elsewhere, a categorization scheme that breaks employees into three groups: true believers, recalcitrants, and muddy middlers. A leader can use this admittedly crude classification to transform or redirect an organization's culture, but they'd be wise to avoid misclassifying any individual. Also, the RO3 strategy only works because the individuals can progress among categories. In other words, the fluidity of the groupings aids cultural change. The categories are only useful because they don't hold. As constructs, human classifications such as race engender two primary problems. One, they efface the individual, assimilating their uniqueness into a broad and deep collective, sort of like Star Trek's Borgs. Two, no individual can readily escape the gravitational pull of their racial category and its assumptions. Resistance is futile. There are obviously plenty of other problems as well, but these are two biggies that hamper every scheme to cubbyhole people, racially or otherwise. Great leaders strive to grasp all this, the complexity that ironically gets added when we attempt to simplify the inherent complexity of dealing with humans. We are all dual-natured, part of various groups, yet utterly distinctive. Let me give a specific example from the world of leadership studies. You can find any number of lists that purport to sort out various leadership styles. These range in number from 6 to whatever. The fact that there are so many similar yet dissimilar lists and that no one can even agree on the actual number should be telling. I don't want to single out any particular list, so I leave you to Google the term. It's healthy for leaders to consider themselves in the context of these lists, but I'd avoid taking one of the various leadership style quizzes online, except for novelty purposes. And I'd certainly avoid putting any of it into practice without doing the personal pre-work. The fact is that effective leaders, whatever their preference, apply or even mix different styles depending on specific circumstances, such as culture, the individuals involved, the task at hand, the resources available, the collective mood at the moment, their personal mood at the moment, and on and on. Locking yourself into a particular leadership style or running to consult a list of 8 to 10 or 20 separate available styles and trying to determine which to apply seems absurdly impractical. Leadership's about adaptation and movement, not imposition and rigidity. Selecting a style and then meticulously implementing it flies in the face of everything a true leader wants to achieve. Instead, such leaders start with themselves, building their character through behaviors that reflect their values and aspirations. Without that base, applying or even identifying a personal leadership style is as bound to fail as applying any leadership strategy sans foundation. Successful leadership starts with laying the groundwork of the self, not following a formula. The upshot? By all means, slice and dice and categorize so long as doing so serves you and others well. But don't fool yourself. Most of these categories, including leadership styles, were made up by you or someone else. They may or may not be based on careful observation. That hardly matters since perceptions mislead and shit happens. Leaders generally work toward progress, which is positive change. Why would a leader want to cram their efforts into arbitrary and static confines? Furthermore, leaders know that categories are never entirely neutral and always prone to slip into stereotype. For instance, how many times do we hear that these team members are go-getters, these undependable, and these just collecting a paycheck. Not only are such categories too rigid, but they defy everything we know about mindset shifts. A leader's job is to discover the drive and inspiration that will compel all team members to contribute to productivity. So long as it's useful, leaders categorize, just like everyone else, but they do so while allowing for the fluidity of human reality. They, in fact, count on it. In the end, classifications, however handy at the moment, hold us back, and leaders want nothing less than to move us forward. Humans love categories. Yes, categories have their uses. But leaders also know that our very humanity renders classification ultimately counterproductive. How aware are you of the categories you apply to your team members? How accurate are these categories? Leaders develop the critical awareness to discern when categories outlive their usefulness, and I can help. Unlock the great leader within. Download my free resource, the Transform to Greatness Toolkit, now at thegreatleadershiptoolkit.com. I look forward to hearing from you.